everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Factory Tour. I am your host, Paul Patterson, and I will be joined each and every week by one of DFF's amazing analysts to discuss a myriad of topics. Of course, we'll be talking about the most notable items in the Dynasty landscape, but I also want to dive into strategy, hot takes, everything in between. Today, for our first episode, I'm going to be talking to the man that actually recruited me to the Factory in the first place. He's a co-owner, an analyst, a film guru, master fisherman, and king of the YouTube short. He truly does it all. I am referring, of course, to Billy Beaman, found on Twitter at WillyBeamanDFF. Billy, how are we doing tonight?
Oh, amazing after that. Wow, professional introduction. You sound like you've been doing this for a while, dude.
I want to hit him, hard on that first episode. I don't want them to be like, oh, these are just some idiots, doing another Dynasty show. Like, just sound good to start it off.
Oh wow, I was getting on here to be a couple idiots. I don't know.
We can still be idiots. All right. Yeah. So it's great to have you here, Billy, and we don't want to waste any time. So we're gonna jump into one of the more relevant news items right now. Obviously, deep into rookie prospect season. Drafts coming up, but otherwise, not a lot going on in the veteran markets, except for Odell Beckham Jr., who just signed with the Baltimore Ravens. Got a kind of a contract that looked big. I don't know how much the cap hit actually is, but seems like Baltimore kind of trying to maybe bring some weapons in for Lamar Jackson, try to get him to stick around. What do you think about that signing?
I mean, it's great for OBJ. Guy's making some money. And I think from the cap hit perspective, not that we all care about that in the fantasy community, but I'm pretty sure they somehow work the books and it's like nothing this year. So they're doing all right. I think really what it is kind of some bait for Lamar, trying to bring him back in. I don't know how much I love it. He comes in as one of the best talents next to Bateman. I mean, he's obviously a better talent than Bateman. He's just, further in his career. So he's not a guy who I'd like to go out and get or anything in fantasy. I mean, maybe in startup drafts, he might be cheap, but with this news, obviously he's not going to be anymore. His value is going to kind of skyrocket. I'd probably be trying to sell off of this news if I could.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Definitely not someone I'm looking to get, just a wide receiver 2 or kind of wide receiver 1A in a run first offense with, Lamar Jackson at best and at worst, Tyler Huntley or some other replacement level starter. So just not a great spot for him fantasy wise. Definitely a good spot for him financially, as opposed to being out of the league. For what it's worth, Beckham wasn't terrible in 2021. The last time he played, he was still earning volume at a decent rate, but we don't really know how he's going to come back after that second ACL tear. So just not something I'm looking to buy into. Like, just a lot of other ways I'd rather address the wide receiver position. So I think we can look elsewhere. Maybe last round of your best ball drafts or whatever, but otherwise, we can steer clear.
Absolutely. Right there with you.
So let's talk about some younger wide receivers, some prospects.
Yeah.
You've
Let's do
been
it.
dropping some YouTube shorts or some longer content where you're breaking down film on some of these prospects. And, I'm not a film guy at all. So when I watch football, it's just for fun. I don't really know what's going on the field until I look at the numbers. But you do, you know what's going on out there. So who are some of your favorite guys? Maybe some kind of middle tier prospects that most people know, and then maybe some deeper prospects that we can talk about what you've seen on film.
Yeah. Obviously getting away from the big names and the Zay Flowers and all that. Everybody can talk about those, and you can go watch my video on Zay Flowers if you want to see some awesome dynamic film. But for me, some of the guys in the middle rounds that you were talking about, middle tier, Marvin Mims is a guy who I think really stands out from Oklahoma. Jaden Reed from Michigan State. Those are two guys who I think are going to be a little undervalued. We just did a mock draft with the Dynasty Underdog crew with some of the guys in the Discord there, and Jaden Reed fell to like the end of the fourth, which I think is kind of bonkers, and also just shows you how kind of unknown he might be, but he's kind of rising up the ranks. So he's a guy who I like. The lower ranked guys, Tyler Scott, he I think showed out at the combine maybe with the 4.32 speed or whatever that was, some at 4.34, something really high. But the film stands out to me too when I went and watched it. And then Charlie Jones was a guy who I saw at the combine run really fast, and I was like, who's this kid who's running really, really fast? And I went and watched the tape, and I'm like, oh, this guy can play, man. He's about to enter the retirement home, but he can play.
Yeah, okay, all right. So we got four names there, kind of a wide range.
Yeah,
Let's just talk a little bit about them one at a time. We'll just go in that order. I think
sure.
that's kind of the order that they are in, like looking at consensus rankings. Marvin
Hmm.
Mims clearly at the top of that group, most likely because he's looking like the best shot to get that round two draft capital. But when
Yeah.
you watch Mims, what is it that is jumping out to you about him?
Okay, so when I first started watching him, I wasn't like super excited about it when I, first got into the tape. I thought, especially after the catch, he lacked a little bit of wiggle, a little bit of elusiveness. And I like to see that from these guys heading into the league where they can create yards after the catch consistently. That said, though, the more and more I watched him, the more he impressed me before the catch. He is more of a straight line speed receiver, and I guess that's why he doesn't necessarily have as much of that lateral quickness. But he shows really good route technique, and he has a really good release. He can really just put his foot in the ground and accelerate at hyperspeed. And for a guy of his size and kind of build, you really like to see that he can separate from defenders with that acceleration and that quickness. I think he shows a really good ability to fight through contact during the route and at the catch point. Also, something I think that'll really translate to the NFL. He exhibits understanding of leverage during the route, kind of how to lean into defenders, use them to create separation, use the sideline to create separation. So he's got kind of a high IQ as well. So he's got that good burst off the line, and he's got the good size and good speed. So I think he does lack some of that after the catch ability, but you're not going to get that from every receiver. And I think that he can be a guy who could get himself with that draft capital with, the right role. He could get himself to a wide receiver two type player. That's
Mhm.
probably at best. I mean, he could have more upside than that, but that's kind of where I would, put him.
Okay, okay, super interesting. Just to put some context, numbers wise, to Mims as a prospect, he did break out at 18, so he produced early in college. He is also declaring early for the draft, so that's always a good sign when you produce early. You come out early. He ran that 4.3840, so that's that speed you were talking about. Interestingly, he was never super dominant in college, so he never hit that 30% dominator rating in college. He did break that 20% threshold, like I said, as a freshman, but never plateau, got above that 30% plateau, which is probably, I would say, due to his style of play, like just not a high volume, maybe kind of player, if that makes sense, based on
Mm-hmm.
the way that he was used. And we might see the same thing in the pros. He might not be that guy that can command massive volume just because of the way that he's used.
Yeah, I could see that. And one thing I will say, watching the film, the offense at times seemed like allergic to throwing the ball. Like it really it was just crazy because I get the film where I'm watching 40 minutes and it's every offensive play two times, and I'm just like sitting there and I'm like, are you guys really going to do this? Like you have a guy who you can use, and there just didn't seem to. So I don't know if it was all that he couldn't kind of demand the work. So I think there might be a
Mhm.
little context around it. That said, I don't see him as like a high volume guy either in the NFL.
Yeah, yeah, that makes perfect sense. By the way, all the numbers that I'm using, just want to quickly give a shout out.
Mm-hmm.
This all comes from the rookie model of Chris Miles, who is another one of our analysts
Nice.
over at DFF, and then some stuff that he didn't have on his spreadsheet, I also grabbed from Peter Howard's amazing prospect database. So that's where all this stuff comes from. Let's go ahead and get on to Jaden Reed. I think he's maybe an even more interesting player. Before you get going on the film eval, I'll just give a
Yeah.
little bit of context as well. He broke out at 18 as well at Western Michigan, which is where he started, 18 years old. He's 5'11, 187, ran 4.45 in the 40. Had kind of an interesting journey, eventually transferred from Western Michigan to Michigan State, and that's where he finished out his collegiate career. So, what did you see from Reed on the film?
I love that you said that about him transferring because he actually had to miss an entire year when he transferred. So that's a part of the reason why he probably stayed in school longer and why he's maybe a little bit of an older prospect coming out. I didn't know. I don't know if you mentioned his age. The only other thing to mention is that his production was so down this past year because he suffered a lacerated back which was just like this freak injury that kept him out most of the year. So he would have had two really, really productive years if you look what he was on pace for. Just two really productive years to finish his career. So I think that kind of goes missing in his profile a little bit. But from a film perspective, I love watching this kid. He's a little smaller, obviously, like he's 6 foot, but he 185, so the smaller frame. But just he has such a smooth and quick release. He accelerates so fast off the line. He's like shot out of a cannon, and it looks like he's running at full speed almost instantly. And you love to see that, right? Because and it's not just that he has that, it's also he has good route technique. He can start and stop quickly from that acceleration. So you love to see that because that's just those dynamic players do really well in this new NFL where they use these guys in the slot. They can get open fast. The only thing about him that I didn't love was I just didn't see a lot of yards after the catch. Like that's a big thing with these guys that you want to see because it's not just can you get open and get the ball. It's can you do something with it after that. And with his small frame and with it just what it seemed, just his lack of ability to do so, it wasn't necessarily he doesn't have the wiggle or he doesn't have the elusiveness. I think he does have some of it. It just doesn't seem to be really in his game. That said, I mean, he shows some really filthy route running without losing speed through the route. He separates from defenders, whip routes, just all different stuff. He has different release techniques. So it's something that I think the NFL is going to look at and be like, wow, we can really develop this guy into something, even though he's a little smaller in frame. I think, 6 foot, at least that's what I saw, 6 foot. That's something he can build that 185 up into. So I'm kind of excited to see if he gets that draft capital, if he gets, day 2 draft capital, something like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like you said, the lack of yards after catch didn't prevent him from having a super dominant season, 36.5% best season dominator rating. So he was still productive. Maybe he doesn't have that yards after catch ability, but they said the same thing about Chris Olave, and he seems pretty good too. So not quite in that tier. Probably not going to go top 12 in the draft, but he has been getting a little bit of buzz. It seems like he's got a shot to get into that round 3 range, which is what you really want to see for wide receivers. The hit rates really fall off afterward. You do find those Amon-Ra St. Brown, Stephon Diggs in the day 3 range, but the percentages just really drop off. So you want to really, be heavily invested in a wide receiver prospect. You want them to get that day 2 draft capital. So hopefully we'll get that for Reed. I don't think we're going to get it for these last 2 guys, but let's talk about them anyway. Not to bury them before they even get out here, but let's talk about Tyler Scott.
You spreadsheet guys, you have no love for the underdogs, man.
I know, we are cold-blooded killers. We see that round 4 next to the name, we just cross them off. No, not quite, but it does get a little bleak. But Tyler Scott, he did not break out at 18, unlike these first 2 guys. He was a later breakout, age 20. Listed 5'10", 177, so definitely a smaller guy. Like you said, very fast. Had some decent production. Best season dominator, 34.7%. That's better than Mims. He is declaring early for the draft. It remains to be seen if that's a good decision on his part, but it's a good decision for his fantasy prospects. If you look at hit rates. One thing I wanted to shout out was receiving yards per team pass attempt, which is a pretty big metric in the analytics community. It's just one of the more predictive metrics for future success. Not a guarantee in any sense, whether you're good or bad at it. But Scott did score pretty poorly in his best season, 2.17 yards per team pass attempt, which was in the 22nd percentile in Chris's database of 306 wide receiver prospects. So despite that high dominator season, maybe not the most efficient player in college. And, that is something that is a concern for him. But what did you see on the tape?
That's interesting. Yeah, he popped up on the film for me. I thought he was a really good route runner. I thought that he showed really good hands, good burst, and good yak ability. He seemed to be able to break away from defenders at a pretty high rate, at least on the film. That's what it looked like. A big part of his game is using that speed to get on defenders' toes. And then he is a pretty good route technician. Like he's good at stopping on a dime. He's good at breaking off through the stem into, whether it's an out route, slant, anything like that. It's just really crisp, really fast. He has good catch to run transition. So I think there's a lot of his game translates to the NFL, but yeah, the numbers are a little concerning for sure. I mean, he's obviously not going to get the draft capital that we want, like you said, that third round, but he does kind of strike me as a guy like Romeo Dobbs, right? Maybe that fourth round DC. When I watch him on film, he reminds me a lot of him, a guy who can get downfield. He does catch the ball with his body sometimes a little too much downfield, but other than that, I don't see too many holes in his game.
Yeah, so Romeo Dobbs, I like that comp. I can't speak to it from a stylistic perspective, but just from a draft capital perspective, a ceiling perspective, with a guy like that with his breakout, his projected draft capital, that's probably what you're looking at. Not a super high ceiling, but potentially a guy who can get a role, who can, get his way onto the field and have a few spike weeks, during the season. So not a useless player by any stretch, just not the high ceiling outcome, but you're not going to have to spend a lot in rookie drafts to get him either. Let's finish things up here with Charlie Jones, who puts all these other guys, makes them look like they're fresh out of the daycare. Charlie Jones didn't break out until his age 23 season in college when he transferred over to Purdue. But it was a super dominant season, 40.5% dominator rating. I can't say a lot optimistic for him on the production front, the analytics front, because he just looks a whole lot like a lot of other trap wide receivers we've seen throughout the years, where they don't do anything until their senior season or their year 5 senior season, super seniors, who just suddenly dominate an offense when they're 5 years older than the competition. But that,
Yeah,
but there
no,
are
it's true. It's
outliers,
true.
and it does work out from time to time. So what is it about Charlie Jones that makes you think that he could succeed at the next level?
Yeah, it's all about his route running, really. He's incredible. Like he really is. He's great off the line. He has a great release, incredible suddenness, acceleration from the release through the route. He's really able to get on defenders' toes. And I would describe him as a route technician where he's, using head fakes, shoulder fakes, all sorts of different, double moves. And it's just stuff that's not easy for a lot of these guys to do. And obviously he's older, and that makes sense. But the skill set that he has is something that these NFL scouts are going to be like, oh, like the Patriots are going to be like, Mac Jones can definitely use this dude. You know what I mean? Like he's able to separate with route running, and he uses leverage. He uses spacing, sits down in zones, uses the sideline. It's just he's a high IQ wide receiver. And much more than even Mims. Like this guy is so low on the totem pole, but I think he's possibly the best route runner of any of the guys we talked about, right? And that's like it's probably fairly easy to say. Yeah, he's got speed, like and it all shows up on tape, and it showed at combine, it showed in testing. So if the guy can play, he can play. The numbers are the numbers, and the hit rates are the hit rates. But obviously, there's a percentage of these guys who can make it, and I would bet on this guy at the value, especially. I don't think you're gonna have to pay much for him at all, and so I like him for that reason.
Yeah, that's awesome. I definitely think, there's a good chance he's your fifth round rookie pick or even undrafted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about this is like, it's not to say that if he goes in the seventh round that he's bad at football. It's more so it's tough for these guys to get a shot. And once they get a shot, they have a very limited time to prove their ability, So with a guy like Charlie Jones, if he's very polished and he gets that shot, whether it's due to injury or he goes to a very shallow depth chart, if he gets on the field and he has those skills, maybe he has a better shot of sticking on the field as opposed to some other guys that go in late rounds that are, going there because they're very raw players or they're very unrefined because the coaches aren't going to want to spend a lot of time trying to find that diamond in the rough that they drafted later on. So definitely a shot for Charlie Jones. Hopefully he can, sneak his way into that day 3 mix and maybe find himself in a favorable spot, maybe a good quarterback situation. We'll see. We'll see. There's from time to time these guys they break out of nowhere, and it could be for him.
Yeah. I mean, last thing I want to say really quick about this, and I think a lot of like film analysts and like I wouldn't describe myself as necessarily that because I think I'm pretty well rounded. Like I came up with like a data analyst background, and I always liked film as a kid. I kind of taught myself through tons of YouTube videos and just like throughout the years and so many different things, and just knowing the game and having a good feel for it. But I'm not beholden. I'm not like I don't get take lock on my film grades. Like I do it it's twofold. One is to get to know the players really well, and I feel like that gives me an advantage personally in just knowing them. I like having a well-rounded understanding of who they are because I do feel like I can watch film. But once Charlie Jones goes undrafted, like I'm not going to pick him in the third or fourth round. Like I'll just let him go undrafted and I'll maybe get some shares of him and hope it works out. I understand the way it works, but some of these guys can play and never get a shot. That's how it goes. So sometimes it is what it is. But I did want to say that because I think a lot of guys get take lock on that and they're like, I have to be right about Tyler Scott and Charlie Jones, but it's okay.
I think that is absolutely huge. Yeah, because you had those people that left Hakeem Butler at their wide receiver 1 overall spot. After he fell to the 4th round, and it's just a mistake. You got to marry the two together and make an informed decision that way. So totally on board with that. All right, so love all this wide receiver prospect talk. The Patriots are a team that may be looking to draft a wide receiver this year, get Max some weapons. Right. Yes, big Patriots fan. A lot of Patriots fans at Dynasty Football Factory. So I'm not going to be able to talk to all of them about the Pats. We got to talk about other teams, but I will let you talk about your team, especially because the Patriots, who have the 14th pick, have been linked to many a wide receiver prospect. Zay Flowers is a popular one. Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, all these guys have been mocked to the Patriots at 14. So what I want to know is, do you think the Patriots will take a wide receiver there? Do you think that they should? And if they do, which one do you prefer?
Did you ask me if they want to ruin a wide receiver this year? Yeah, I'm sure they do. I think the only two that, by the way, you picked the right Patriots fan to talk to because I'm probably the most reasonable one you'll ever find. But but at 14, man, it better be JSN or Zay Flowers, really. Like those are the only two I want to see picked there. I know everybody likes Jordan Addison, and I think Jordan Addison's a good player. 14's a little rich for me because he's just a little small, and not to get into the dirty details of the film with him, but like everybody will tell you he can't beat press. Like he just can't do it. He's too small. And that's just, so I don't really want to go for a guy who can't win at all facets. And I think Zay Flowers can do that. And I think JSN obviously can do that. And I think he gets kind of a bad rep for not being able to play on the outside at all. Like I think he can play a little bit more. I think he's a little more versatile than people give him credit for. That said, man, it better be one of those two guys because I think those are only two guys who can overcome what the Patriots do to wide receivers, and that's not develop them. So other than that, I would like to see them go for like a guy like Marvin Mims, maybe in the second, third-ish round. If we can get him there, that'd be a good target, I think.
Or Charlie Jones in the 6th.
Listen, yeah, that would be good value. I'm sure Belichick
Could be the
would
next
love that.
Jacoby Myers, right? They the only wide receiver they've developed in the last decade was undrafted, so maybe that's the move for you.
Yeah, they have to have that inner drive. It can't come from the development's not from us, it's from them.
I'm so interested to see if Quentin Johnston gets picked. Just the N'Keal Harry like PTSD that people are going to feel about a bigger bodied traditional X style wide receiver. Like people are going to have such whiplash with that. I don't know if they're going to be able to press the button in rookie drafts, but I think it would be interesting. I don't have a super strong take about who I want to go there. I think JSN's the best wide receiver in the class, so I think you guys would be pretty happy to get him, and he definitely can play outside. Like so silly, Justin Jefferson played his entire last season in the slot as well. I know he had a longer track record of playing outside, but JSN was playing with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, and then dealt with injury. He just didn't get a chance to show it. But you're not that good by accident. Like he's got the skills, and I think he's going to thrive in whatever offense he ends up in. So hopefully the Patriots can't ruin him. You guys do have a new offensive coordinator who's going to maybe switch things up for you. Bill O'Brien is there replacing Matt Patricia, who somehow found himself there by accident, or I don't know, he like blackmailed somebody or whatever, but he's been replaced. So what do you think of that? And like, what's that going to mean for the offense?
I do just want to plug before I hop into that. I do want to plug the article I did. I'm not just a film junkie. I am a data nerd too. I did the slot rate data stuff for JSN and just kind of disproving that whole theory and how all of the top players in the NFL produce from the slot. So plug in that, go read that at dynastyfootballfactory.com. With the new OC in terms of for Mac Jones, like it's obviously good because they have a competent guy at the helm now. Like that was the biggest problem last year is you had guys who never had had done this work before and shouldn't have been put in the position they were. So yes, this is definitely an upgrade for the Patriots for Mac Jones. He's going to get probably more usage and the best out of whatever weapons we do have. So you could probably see an improvement from Juju, right? You could probably see an improvement from maybe Tyquan Thornton, like those kind of guys who really didn't do anything. I think we could see them schemed up a little bit better. Do I have any hope for Mac Jones? He could be an average quarterback in the league. The way that the Patriots are talking about them, it's like that. It's like he could be out of there before the season starts. It's like that, I could see him being moved and them going Lamar route, or I don't know that, the media up there is talking about stepping in and getting Aaron Rodgers and moving on from him, so I just don't see a long-term way that he succeeds with the Pats personally. Definitely not for fantasy. That's the biggest part of it. I'm not a proponent of Mac Jones, the fantasy asset.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. Like he could be better this year. Bill O'Brien could bring the offense forward a little bit, maybe a higher pass rate, maybe a little bit more aggressive. It doesn't matter. Like I don't want Mac Jones on my fantasy team. It doesn't even really matter like how cheap he gets in Superflex. I guess if he gets down into that, Jimmy Garoppolo, Ryan Tannehill range, then you can grab him to be your QB3 or whatever. But he just has no ceiling to speak of, and he he doesn't,
Whatsoever.
he doesn't. Like his ceiling outcome of a career is to be Kirk Cousins, and like that's not a ceiling. Like it's not, and even that is like hard to imagine, right? So it's not a guy you want to go out and get. And if people are in any way excited when they draft a wide receiver at 14, maybe you can go take that news and you can go sell Mac Jones, try to pivot onto a quarterback that has some semblance of upside or something like that, or sell him for like an older quarterback and get something on top because he's just not going to win you anything. But there is a player in
Yeah.
the Patriots offense that could win you something. Almost won people stuff last year, except he just like forgot how to play for the last 3 weeks of the season. I don't know what happened there, but Ramondre Stevenson, this big bodied back, gets a million
Okay.
targets. He comes out of nowhere as a fifth round pick, I believe he was, and just takes Damian Harris's lunch money and he scores all the fantasy points. But now, because he's a Patriots running back and because he was a day 3 pick, suddenly people aren't so sure what his future holds. So, what do you think about
Mm.
Ramondre Stevenson, the player and the dynasty asset?
He did get injured towards the end of the season, so he didn't forget how to play. It was definitely the offense was awful, and we were chasing points, and he was injured. So that was a big part of it. I'm a huge Ramondre Stevenson guy. It's funny, I was in on him before anybody was. He was one of those guys who I saw on film play at where was it, Oklahoma or forgot where it was
I
exactly,
believe
but I
so.
remember I think it was right. And I remember watching him. I was like, dude, this guy's light on his feet. That looks good. And it's pretty cool when he got drafted to the Patriots and it all worked out. That said, I do think his value's gotten a little high, but we were talking, I think, a little bit about the ADP earlier being around running back 12-ish,
That's
right?
right.
And
Yep.
and that seems kind of appropriate, I guess. It does seem an appropriate place for him, especially with the guys falling behind him. I do just have real concerns about the Patriots sticking with him long term, right? I do think that at most this is what like a 2-year window you're getting out of him. And
Mhm.
I mean, I guess that's with most running backs, right? But I think that he does have even more risk that they draft somebody in the 4th round also or 5th round this year and they like him for some reason or he ends up, finding a role. So or they use somebody else
Mhm.
in the receiving game or they use James Robinson too much. Whatever it is, there's just a lot of risk there when it comes with the Patriots and for that reason I don't like rostering him too much.
Mhm.
I do have some shares and I can't see myself selling him. I like it just can't see it.
Just because you don't think you'll get the right value, or because you just
Yeah.
like having him on your team?
It's no, I don't play Dynasty that way. It's I don't think that I can sell him and get appropriate
Mhm.
value really.
Yeah.
It's weird. And I guess it's because he's like in that perfect like purgatory area of running back 12, right?
Yeah, I think he's valued properly. I'll just
Yeah.
say I'm kind of fine with rostering him. I'm even fine with buying him if I can get him at a reasonable price. Just looking at where he fits in, I have bulletproofff.com's ADP. They have some startup ADP on there. He's, like I said, RB12. He's going 1 pick after Tony Pollard. He's going right before other running backs, Nick Chubb, Damian Pierce, DeAndre Swift. J.K. Dobbins. So where I'm at with Stevenson
Yeah.
is I think he still has a really good shot to produce RB1 numbers this season in terms of like his size and volume and
Mhm.
like especially his receiving ability. He can still produce in that RB1 range. And then, after that, who knows? But I feel like most running backs outside of like the first two rounds of startups are kind of 1 year at a time running back. So like if I'm getting one of those guys, I want it to be one that has that league winning upside. And I don't necessarily buy into this pattern matching idea of like Patriots running back equals, getting replaced because I don't think that there are a lot of one for one comps in terms of what Ramondre brings to the table for the team. And I do think that he is a good running back. Like in terms of advanced metrics, he performs really, really well. So I'm not that worried if they go out and get a third or fourth or fifth round running back to replace whatever work Damian Harris was getting. I still think he's going to be very, very viable. The only thing that would, terrify me is if they go with like a Gibbs or a Charbonnet or God forbid somehow Bijan falls to them, then it's over. Like he's going to be a timeshare at best, or he's going to be completely vaporized. But I just don't really see that. So I'm fine with him where he's going. I'd gladly give up a wide receiver like Michael Pittman or DJ Moore, who's going right near him to get that kind of league winning
Wow.
potential.
Wow. We are
Um,
out on DJ Moore.
I'm done with DJ
Wow.
Moore, dude. Go watch my YouTube short. I destroyed that man.
You did.
I used to love him. Used to be my highest rostered wide receiver in Dynasty, and I just cannot sell
Wow.
him fast enough on the Bears.
Wow.
But yeah, those wide receiver two types, I'm willing to move those guys for even one season of that potential league winning running back production, assuming you're contending, of course. But does that line of thinking, make sense to you?
It does. I does. I do like you pushing back on the narrative, the Patriots narrative, right? I do like that because I think you're right. He is more unique, a more unique back than they've had in recent history. And I actually was listening to some Patriots guys talk about because of course it's come up. Bijan Robinson, are they going to get him at 14, this, that, and the other? And it's like he is kind of Bijan light, right? He
Mm.
does all of the Bijan. He can catch, he can run, he's light on his feet, works between the tackles, good vision, all the stuff, right? But he's obviously not as talented as Bijan Robinson. So yeah, like he's a great player. So I'm glad that you said kind of what your price is there. That's man. I feel like I'd feel bad giving up a youngish wide receiver for 1 year of a Ramondre Stevenson. That said, in a contending situation, it definitely makes sense. So
Yeah, let's
I dig it.
let's look at it from a different angle, which is in terms of draft picks.
Okay.
Because right now, well, really all year long, but right now especially, draft picks are really the ultimate currency of dynasty fantasy football. That's how we evaluate the value of players, and it's really the most liquid asset you've got because everybody wants draft picks. Per ADP, Ramondre's going in between the 107 and the 108 pick in rookie drafts right now. I will say if you can take Ramondre, you can add a little bit and you can get into that 105, 106 range, I would do that in a heartbeat. Like add something on top of Ramondre and get in there because you're going to get either a Gibbs or a JSN or one of those quarterbacks there at that pick. After that, there's a little bit of a teardrop, but depending on draft capital, we could see someone like Zach Charbonnet or one of these top end wide receivers also, hold a lot of value in that 107 spot. So I think that that's kind of the tipping point for me. Anything lower than 107, I'm probably content to hold tight. But how do you feel about that range in terms of draft capital?
I'm pretty much there with you. The one thing I'm kind of surprised about that I'm kind of segueing from this is I'm surprised the spreadsheets don't dock Gibbs a little bit more for the sub 200. Like
Oh man, if you,
does that not take issue?
we're gonna be here all night if you start talking to me about Jameer Gibbs, dude. I can't even. I've got so much to say about Gibbs. I'll give you the abbreviated version. Let me just say, I did a podcast with Dynasty Zoltan. You can find. We talked about
Mhm.
Jameer Gibbs for about 45 minutes, and about why he's currently pending top 40 draft capital. Currently my Dynasty RB5. But
Okay,
you can
good.
find out about that. But let me just say, yeah, the sub 200 thing. It's a bit of a fallacy. There's kind of like a range there. If you cut it off at 200, it gets tougher. You still have guys like Chris Johnson, Jamal Charles that are in that range. But if you look at like CMC and Austin Eckler, who came into the league just a couple of pounds heavier than Gibbs, that was your RB1 and RB2 last year in points per game. So I'm a little bit more concerned with the receiving upside and what that brings for Gibbs because he has one of the best receiving profiles you'll ever see. And I'm a little bit less worried about the size. I get why some people are, but I'm kind of willing to take the shot on that potential like 20 point per game ceiling. But anyway, I
Okay.
digress. I digress.
I love it. I love it.
Let's stick with the draft pick discussion.
Okay.
Um, and let me just kind of give you a little bit of runway here. What are you doing in your leagues where you have, a good amount of draft capital, whether that be an early first, a late first, or just a whole bunch of second round picks? How are you approaching rookie drafts? Are you looking to get more picks? Are you looking to trade away your picks? Give us a little bit of context to that kind of trade conversation.
Cool. Yeah. So the way that I generally play Dynasty is I really try to create a roster of all studs. And I know that's super that simplifies the game a lot, right? But I want to make it as easy as possible to not have to make decisions like, between wide receiver threes and stuff. Like I want to just try to line up as many top end guys as I can. So when you're
Love that.
asking me, yeah, thank you. So I think everybody should do that. When you're asking me like, what am I trying to do with these picks? Almost always, if I have in this, I'm not like generally I'm trying to compete. So generally I find myself at the end of drafts, not in all my leagues. I have some early picks, but generally I find myself in that like 107 to 112 range. And with those, I'm either trying to move for a player that is, guaranteed production, or a young guy with upside that is pretty stable, or I'm trying to add something to it and I'm trying to move up into the top 5, right? Because that is a spot where I'm comfortable that this guy is going to have long-term value. I can sell him for something else, or he's going to produce for my team.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I pretty much only play super flex. So that's going to be, quarterbacks and the top 2-3 position players. So that's what I'm looking to do with my picks. If I have really high ones, I'm trying to hold people's feet to the fire until I'm on the clock. And then I will try to move back or get out most of the time, unless I'm like starving for a QB and nobody will sell me a vet.
Love that. I'm almost perfectly in line with you, I think, on all those points. Love the humble brag about the late picks. That's great. We're in one or two leagues together. I know you got a late pick in that console wars league, but yeah,
Yep.
I agree with you. Try to get up into that hot spot or try to move off the pick. One thing I will say, I think there's a trap people fall into where they move those late firsts into those sort of wide receiver 2 type players, like trading them for, a Brandon Ayuk, Terry McLaurin types. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think what you're doing there is you're kind of limiting your upside in favor of like a higher floor, when in reality, the players you're going to pick with those rookie picks actually have a higher floor than you think and also have that growth potential. Thinking of like a Christian Watson type or like a George Pickens, who I'm not really like a big fan of, but had some value increase after his rookie year, some hype that you could sell off of. So I think packaging those picks to move up or to get like legit studs is a great move. But I'm not necessarily moving them for like quote unquote safer players that are valued similarly. I think that's kind of a trap that people fall into, where you end up with a bunch of guys, like you said, where you don't know who to start, and you have these kind of like middle tier assets, and you end up leaving Jerry Jeudy on your bench when he scores 3 touchdowns. That didn't happen to me last year, but definitely
No.
didn't happen to me in the fantasy playoffs. But anyway, anyway,
That's
yeah.
actually, I do think, I just want to say I do think that's a fair point. And I haven't sold many of those picks for straight up for like guys like, why I just haven't gotten those deals done, and it's likely because I just haven't thought that they were valuable enough. So I think that's a good point, and I do end up generally going up higher into the early rounds of the draft, or packaging them for studs. That's what I have found myself doing, is just packaging them with players for something that is a lot more valuable.
Now, with this class, I do actually have some pretty specific advice for what I think people should be doing with those earlier firsts. Like I said, I
Mm-hmm.
love the 105, 106 range because I think
Mm-hmm.
those picks are attainable at like a pretty reasonable value, and you're guaranteed to get one of these top end guys, either, like I said, Gibbs or JSN as like top end positional players, or you might fall into one of the 3 quarterbacks if anybody in your league reaches for one of those positional guys. That being said, I am selling the heck out of the 102, 103, and even the 104 in the leagues that I'm in, because
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the ADP of these picks, like right now, pick 102 is being valued around the 208 in startups. That's two picks after Kyler Murray. I've seen it go even higher in startups that I've been in, as high as like the 202, 203, where you're valuing, whoever your top quarterback is off the board, or assuming Bijan's the 101. So 102 is your top quarterback off the board. You're valuing that guy in the same range as a bunch of quarterbacks that we already know are really good. So if you're 102, whether that be Stroud, Young, AR, if that guy is already valued, closely to Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Deshaun Watson, even Lamar Jackson, I am doing everything in my power to add something onto that pick to get one of those quarterbacks, just completely minimizing the downside risk, locking in that guaranteed upside. That doesn't work in every league, but I would absolutely be trying to either get like one of these established quarterbacks or try to trade back into that sweet spot, 105, 106, pick up something on top. But I don't really want to be stuck there with those early picks outside of the 101.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with everything you said. I must be the lowest person on Kyler Murray ever. I'm kind of not. I'm he's just not one of those guys. Every other quarterback you mentioned, I'm like, yep, totally. But he's just one of those guys for me who I'm kind of just not willing to buy in on anymore. But I get that he has that upside. But yeah, totally. If you can
You
go
just
get
hate
one,
like
like,
high end QB1 production. You're just not a big fan of
I mean, I don't.
that.
Yeah, like I get. Okay, I think that nobody is thinking that he might have a decline in rushing production after an ACL tear.
Well, to be fair, the numbers are pretty murky on that. It seems like probably his first year back, he'll have a decline, but then it's pretty likely he'll get back to pre-injury numbers are pretty close to it, first year post ACL. But I understand the hesitancy. I don't necessarily think he's like an elite player, but I also look around a league that's potentially starting Sam Howell, Desmond Ritter this season, and I'm
Yeah.
like Kyler Murray's going to play in the NFL for quite a while, assuming he can stay on the field. And when he is on the field, he scores fantasy points. So I'm a big fan. I would not hesitate
Okay.
to move the 102 or 103 straight up for Kyler Murray. I'd add a pretty decent piece on top, throw in a wide receiver two or something to get Kyler. But you don't have to, pick your flavor. You can go get Deshaun Watson if you think he's going to bounce back. You can go get Dak if you want like slightly lower ceiling, higher floor kind of guy. But just don't pick
Go
these
get
rookie
Lamar.
quarterbacks unless you
Just
absolutely have to.
just get Lamar.
Get Lamar. Absolutely go get
That's
Lamar.
who
For
it
sure.
is.
I traded 102, no, sorry, 103, 104, and some other small things to get Lamar and Calvin Ridley the other day, and I didn't hesitate.
Mm.
I just
I
loved
like
it.
that. I like that with Ridley thrown in there too.
Yeah. So, like I said, just lock in that
Okay.
upside. Don't worry about the risk. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you pick one of those quarterbacks. I just think it's leaving a little bit of a potential value on the table. That pretty much brings us to the end here of the factory tour. I've been happy to talk with Billy here for, well, we said 30 minutes. I think we went a little over that, but don't regret it. Don't regret a minute of it.
Not
Um,
at all.
keep an eye out for more stuff like this, hopefully dropping every single week. Go check out dynastyfootballfactory.com. Check out the YouTube channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and join our Discord. If you're a member of Dynasty Football Factory, you now have 24/7 access to myself, to Billy, to all of our other analysts. You know, we do sleep from time to time, but otherwise you can get some Dynasty
Barely.
advice from us. You get some trade feedback. We can tell you what we would do in a variety of situations. So I think that's a valuable asset, and it's just a ton of fun to be in there and talk with everybody. Billy, why don't you let the people know what you're working on right now? What do you have going on at the factory?
Totally. Love the shout out for the Discord, man. Love the shout out. I'm not sure anybody sleeps in there, dude, because I wake up and there's messages. As I go to sleep, there's messages. It's wild in there. It's a great time. What I'm working on. So I will, I'm really leading the charge with the YouTube channel. So everybody should subscribe. It's we're pumping out content. So I'll have a lot more film room videos coming out. I am actually going to do a review of a mock draft we just did I was talking about the Dynasty Underdog Discord crew. I'm going to do a review of that because I think it highlights some, fun stuff. And then we have a rookie draft guide coming out. If you're, a member of Dynasty Football Factory, that'll be available. We might actually make it available separate for purchase as well. So yeah, we're excited about this. It's like, I think we have like 80 pages already. So it's pretty vast. It's going to be a big thing. Big shout out at Fantasy Blue Chip leading the charge, Jagger May. big shout out. He's doing the work there, and we have a couple other guys working on it, and they'll get credit on that. But big shout out to him.
How many of those 80 pages are about Charlie Jones?
Well, look, 50 of them, but that's only because
Okay. So you still get 30 pages of other prospects as well. After the 50 pages on Charlie Jones, you do get the other 30 pages as well. So that sounds like a great value at any price.
this is the perk of being able to lead the content channel
Right.
at Dynasty Football Factory. I can do whatever I want.
Sounds like you got the priority straight there.
Oh
So
yeah.
we'll get everybody out of here. Check me out on Twitter at Paul_DFF. Billy's over there at Willie Beaman DFF, and obviously follow the site's account as well at DFF Dynasty. We'll catch you next week on the factory tour. See you later, everybody.